Hey everyone, just some thoughts on triggers because the way the narrative is around triggers right now is that if something triggers me, that's the cue for me to either withdraw from that thing or to try and end that thing from happening. And and that has become just an accepted way of living. Like that's become the navigation, hasn't it? That I have to orientate my life, navigate my life to avoid triggers. But what happens when that's the navigation is that our life becomes smaller and smaller and smaller as we try harder and harder and harder to avoid anything that creates any emotion that isn't wanted. So it becomes smaller, and at the same time, there is a greater and greater attempt to control the external world. So I'm shrinking, my life is getting smaller, and there's um, more manipulation, really, more attempt to control what's happening out there so that it doesn't fire up any old memories. It doesn't bring up any emotional patterns that I don't want. So life is about withdrawing and control. And that's no way to live, is it? That's not the design. And it can't be the design because really what the truth is in all of this is that that self that is under threat and the way the world appears are made of the same conditioning, aren't they? They're it's impossible that the way I see myself and the way I see the world are made of different things. It's literally impossible because the whole way that anything is perceived is a construct of the learned program that has been being built on ever since conception. And so when we're operating from a space of I need to try and protect myself from the world and control it, all that's happening is that conditioning is being fixed more and more in place. And so essentially what's happening, which is interesting to consider, is that we are being re-traumatized. So a trigger moment is actually a re-traumatization by ourselves. And by ourselves, what I'm referring to there is by the learned program of believed reality. So we might have been traumatized by an event, and there might have been a shock into the system. So there might have been actual danger. So we might have been growing up, we might have been abandoned by someone, or been in a scary place, or had physical threats or violence to us. And so there might have been an embodied shock to the whole system. Now, that shock to the system continues within the believed or within the lived experience of being. So that threat of abandonment, that fear of a raised arm or a raised voice, or insecurity around money or housing, it becomes our lived experience. And it continues to dictate the way the self and the world appears. And when we're operating from a space of numbing of any feelings associated with that original insecurity or fear or shame or need, and we're numbing it, and we're avoiding anything that will trigger that again, we're essentially preserving that. We're the whole way of being is preserving intact that trauma. And then that trauma, that believed or that experienced way of being is projected onto everything out there when it's not even there. It's not even happening. It's a lived reality which is coming from that original trauma, projected out into the world, and we react to that projection because we believe the self and the reality are separate. So what's appearing out there, even though it's just made of the same conditioned, learned idea, it looks separate, it looks real, it looks independent, it looks objectively true. And so this self here reacts against it, but it's not even true. It's just a projection from that original fear. But because it looks real, because it looks separate, it's re-traumatizing the whole system. It's saying, yeah, that fear is justified because look how scary the world is. But it's not. It's a lived reality. It's like we're reliving childhood, really, because that young child was never healed, has never been really understood. But we're reliving it and reprogramming. The system reprograms itself when navigation through life is happening from avoidance and control. It's an ongoing reprogramming by the original conditioning. So no wonder we feel so stuck and trapped and helpless, hopeless, limited. It's just a self reconfirming pattern. But now we're in a different space, we're in a different conversation. There is different input coming in, and that input is saying, no, this isn't about escaping, withdrawing and control. This is about being still in the discomfort so that that transition from projected reality to actual reality is able to take place. As long as we're withdrawing, as long as we're controlling, there's no possibility of that transition happening, because that's maintaining this believed idea of self and world. But now we're saying, yeah, when things get triggered, when there are unwelcome emotions, when there is fear, when there's shame, when there's insecurity, stay still, stay present. Be in it to see what happens, to see what is actually true. And that's enormous. That's really huge transformation of living, because that's the end of that tiny child running the show. And that's the start of her or him, that little girl, that little boy, being understood instead of allowed to drive the car. They're in the car, they're understood, but they don't want to be driving any vehicle. That's not their job. They're not equipped for that. They just want to be understood and held and listened to. And now something else is driving the car, and the thing that's now driving the car is presence, sanity, openness, intelligence, reality. That makes much more sense, doesn't it? Yeah. So thank you. Lots of love. Bye.